Hello and welcome to another episode of the Revenue Revolution podcast, sponsored by Joint Flows. Today we're joined by Mark Murray, who is the VP of Customer Success at Room Unlocked. But outside of that, Mark is actually an old colleague and a friend as well. So it's great to have you on the podcast. How are you?
Very good, thanks. And both of you, how are you doing?
Good. Cannot complain. Do you want to bring our listeners up to speed in terms of who you are and how you got to where you are?
I'll give the short version. Yeah, it's so I look after the customer success team at Room Unlocked, and I've always had a passion for our clients, getting involved, making sure we're delivering the right KPIs for them. What can we do to go above and beyond? And I think that's the best thing to get the results out. So I've done that throughout my time, all the way back in the day, working in SaaS products for Maximizer, looking after clients myself, and then getting more heavily involved in the data side and building my way up, working with you, Hitesh and Mick at Yieldify, and our clients there on the sales side, you throwing it over, some of those risky deals coming through, deliver,
There's
delivering
no
on
one
them.
no one
And
better to
deliver.
throw it over to you than you.
Sign it, Mark will fix it.
Well, I had to put that in, didn't I? Some of those. No, it was good fun, and yeah, building up with our clients. It's always been good, and trying to deliver on that, and that's where we are now. Is trying to look after it and making sure within the influencer world, which can be an interesting space amongst a third party, which is probably a challenge, but good fun.
Nice. Well, look, we're really excited to have you here, and I've been dying to have you on the podcast because I know it's going to be good fun and very, very insightful. We've got a lot of people on the podcast from different departments, RevOps, SDRs, marketing, and you're the first person we've got on the customer success side.
Thank
So
you.
what's the state of customer success management and account management like?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I think I was actually at the moment we're interviewing quite a lot of people, so it's good to get their perspective on things. But I think over the last 5 or so years, I would say customer success has come to the forefront of businesses. They say it's the glue of the company because if you get your baseline right, you can survive. Your business can survive by just renewing your clients, and that's the key. So I think there's a lot more attention that's been put into it. Actually, talking to someone this week, they were like, you get confused between support, which is servicing the tickets and stuff that comes in, versus customer success, which is, okay, you do part of that, but it's really building the strategy. How can you get a client from A to B, develop that strategy and keep them renewing? And as I said, it's really getting that baseline. So that's, I think, how things have changed, the priorities, and really making sure you're looking after the client in that responsible way.
Yeah. And we're seeing when I'm speaking to other people in similar roles to yourselves that there's becoming an emphasis, obviously, on that retention piece, as you said, because
Yeah.
you can secure the business in this way, but it's also then the ability to expand within those current accounts as well, being possibly at the forefront now in terms of how you're going to grow that bottom line. What are your thoughts on that, and what kind of strategies are you seeing put into place to support that initiative?
Yeah, it's always what we get asked. It's how do we grow that? I think for me, and I've always said this to the team, and the first priority has got to be forming that relationship with the client, proving your value, and that's what we would aim to do in the first sort of 12 months. I think from a strategic point of view, it's really, I look at it, and I always have in the businesses, actually in sort of Yieldify and previous businesses, developed a maturity model for clients. So it's like you come in at the basic point of where you are, you deliver that for X period of time, be it sort of 6 to 12 months. And then you say, okay, you've got the basics right. Now it's time to step up and add on to that in terms of your strategy. And that goes into the upsell piece where you can. So like right now with where we do is you come in, you could do your influences, but then is there another part within that? So can you add in, as well as the authenticity piece of what we do, can you add in the paid element, or is it just content that you can use across your marketing? So it's building the product feature set on your platform, but getting that feedback from the clients as well, which is quite key. So you're not just going off in a random direction. It's What do you want? What do you need? Are we seeing that across the base? And then, yeah, cool, let's build it in, but we charge for it because obviously we need to cover our costs, but you are delivering the value back on it. And the value piece is actually the key to all of this and getting them to grow.
And that's very, I don't know much about customer success, and I've always been on the new logo side. And
We know from the sales, Mick.
at Joyflows, I'm exposed to more and more post-sales departments, and I love it because it's very value-driven. It's very much about the relationship and that long-term vision and delivering specific pieces of work throughout. But what I tend to see is that you kind of, as the deal gets signed and then you go into more like a business as usual process, you tend to go down a couple of levels in terms of the org chart. How do you maintain that C-level connection throughout?
Yeah, that actually is really interesting. It is. So we try and break it up in amongst the team. So you, for example, you're always going to be selling in at that senior level. That's where the budget is. That's the relationship that you've got to build. However, 95% of the time, and we do get it where we'll get like founders still looking after the product in the day-to-day, but 95% of the time, it's going to drop down to someone in their team as the day-to-day.
Yeah.
So the way that we kind of go about that, and I think it's quite critical, and I've seen over my time, is that you'll have an account manager who will form that relationship with the day-to-day. I call them sort of the champion. You've got to get them on side, loving the product, really enjoying it, seeing the efficiency, and they will feed that up. But then sort of where I am, or, we've got other people in the team, like head of customer success, their role as well is to build the relationship with more of the senior people. So they internally will look after the strategy, wider marketing, for example. But where you build that is we can go and see them, we can update them on what's happening, but it's making sure they're getting the results. They might not attend monthly meetings, but making sure they come on quarterly and they're seeing the value you're actually driving. This is how much I've spent. This is what we're getting back. Here are the results in their inbox. Even, they'll have a look at it or they won't, but you're pitching that back. But then for me as well to take an action myself and say, okay, Mick, you're director of marketing or whatever you might be, are you happy with the results? What can we do? What is your feedback? And that's how we sort of split it, and it works quite well to build that. The other thing I'll throw in, I've always said this, that's quite interesting, and I love from the CS side, is the relationships of going out for lunch or for a few drinks. It's amazing what you find out after someone's had a couple of beers as to this is where the budget might be, or we've got extra coming in. And that's a trust thing. You're taking them out. If someone like this has got 30 minutes, they will talk about their work. That's what they've got to do day to day. You take them out of that environment and you learn so much more about the business, what's going on, and what you could help them with.
Yeah, you should hear Mick after a few beers as well. Really it's exactly the same. It's interesting what you said. So we have this concept within new business around multi-threading and how important it is now more than ever in order to get deals over the line. So from what I'm hearing from you is that the multi-threading shouldn't be stopping. So, you signed a client, as it's handed over, that multi-threading element still begins. So it still continues even. So are you saying, or your recommendation is really that you have different personas within your business who manage those different people as well?
Yeah, and I think that sort of works better. You can absolutely, the day-to-day can still check in with that decision maker and see what's going on. But I think there's a lot going on from a strategic level. They can't, you'll do like a stakeholder analysis of your account, and you can say, okay, who's where, what's going on. But where it becomes tricky is if you need, on both sides, you need to escalate something. I've always recommended to my team, you don't want to burn that relationship. So the day-to-day works with the day-to-day on the client side. You don't want to burn that. And therefore, if they raise it with me, we can go in and we can have that conversation, and it's not going to affect the results and what's happening. And that tends to work quite well in what we do.
Yeah. Well, I see, Mark, is there's quite a lot of moving parts and people involved. So in some teams, you've got customer success. In others, you've got customer success and account managers. In some of the companies, you've got the salespeople still involved throughout, and they get commission. And I tend to find that there's always a little bit of a conflict in how the incentives are built on the commission plans. What's best practice in your eyes? Like, how do you create a successful environment?
Yeah, that's an interesting one. We can look at it in different ways. The sort of approach that I think you take and we tend to go down most of the time is you've got your sales team and sort of the account manager there, or the enterprise sales manager, and they are responsible for that initial sale. So getting them on, doing what they need to do, and just get it over the line. They then pass it over to the customer success team, and then the customer success team is responsible for forming that relationship and then renewing them or upselling them. So where I think, Mick, where you're saying sort of sales might still be involved in some companies, I don't necessarily believe that's right. I found in my time, the relationship after the sale, the relationship is between customer success and that brand. If you then bring in a salesperson, it's obvious what you're doing. And I've seen so many clients just put their back up straight away because they're like, I know what you're here to do. You're trying to get more money out of us versus actually selling the value. So I would tend to stick with the CS team and keep them there. The other approach, I suppose, that you could take, and it depends on time, is that salesperson can still be involved, but they need to make sure they're attending quarterly reviews or monthly reviews. So it depends on how much time they've got, and then they could get a kickback off the back of the renewal. But more often than not, my recommendation is to keep it with the CS team and where the actual day-to-day relationship is.
So to have the incentive on just the one team and then something else with someone else.
Yeah, and that's how we split it. So sort of new business stays with the sales team, and then the renewals and upsells tends to stay with the CS team.
And do you see that customer success managers are getting deeper and deeper into those commercial relationships as well? And if that's the case, how do you train them to be more, not commercially aware, because I think they are by nature, like we work for as a supplier, so you kind of have to be, but more in terms of how to run those conversations and to get, a follow-up step or a milestone completed.
Yeah, I don't think we've mastered it. And it depends on where you are. They are getting deeper and having to get deeper. Again, it goes to my previous point about relationships. I think that is absolutely critical and where you'll find that sort of information out. We try and do as much training as we can, things to look out for, keywords that are mentioned within the team. But it's more that relationship. I think if you've got a good enough relationship with your client, you can just have an open conversation, and that's the route that we tend to go down.
Yeah. And so surely that all begins with the hire, right? So when you recruit these people into the team, there's specific traits, there's people always say, you're either a hunter or a farmer. It's really difficult to be both, right? I don't believe that's necessarily true. I think it's innate within you to be stronger in one of the two, but there are specific skills that you can learn through training as well. But what characteristics do you look for in individuals when you're recruiting them, knowing that now more than ever, there is an emphasis on that ability to be able to grow an account?
I'm actually known so we go through a few rounds of interviews. We get to the presentation, and the presentation for me is always make or break. I'm known with one of my colleagues that when I interview, I sort of set the person up commercially. So we'll run through the presentation, and let's take it. It will be self-serve. We'll pitch a self-serve, and then we'll say, okay, well, that brand that you're presenting on, they don't have enough resource to actually do any more campaigns. What would you do in that scenario? That's a bit basic, but we set it up like that, and we see what they come back with, and that's how we see whether they commercially savvy or not. So someone will either come in and they'll be like, we can sell management, or you can purchase more campaigns, we'll make it work, we can do it for you. Or someone will go, actually, you're doing what you can, leave it like that. And you're like, oh, okay, is that the right approach? Do you go into a more junior role? What works for them? So we set that up in the interview.
And we spoke about the involvement of customer success and commercial teams post-signature, but what should it look like pre-signature? So how and when should you involve customer success? Should you do it to start with? What's your view on this?
Can tell we've worked together, Mick.
I love it.
No, he's a love taking Mark.
Yeah, I know.
When we had
I knew where I
100%
was
close
coming
rate
from.
whenever I took you.
He's set himself up here. He's wanting me to talk about all of his sales deals. It's so actually, I think it's a really good question. And a lot of the deals that I've seen in all of my career that tend to be the successful ones in the past is when a customer success person has been involved, not necessarily from the beginning, but at some stage in the sales process. So the way that I like it to work is you've got your sales team there. You guys, you need to do your job and actually source it and, get that lead in. So you do that. But then when you're getting to final stages and really getting into the nitty gritty, that's the word, of like what are the KPIs, what is success to you? We want to run sort of these campaigns over a 6-month period. That's when CS should be involved. I wouldn't expect you to know sort of that level in the ins and outs. So that's where we'd do it. I remember both of us actually went on that trip to Wales, and that's what we were there for. It's, you were selling it in, and then it's how do we get into the granularity? But not only that, I think it really builds the trust of the prospect. So they're like, okay, they know what they're talking about. You're pulling out stats and saying, cool, this is actually what we can do. We could run this campaign or that campaign, and the value off the back of it. So towards the end, I think is where they should be involved. And then also, exactly what you're handing over versus just being thrown something on Salesforce and it's like, cool, pick it up, run with it, and hope it works out.
Yeah, I agree, and I think the smarter CSM leaders and stakeholders will find value in maintaining that continuity and starting just that little bit earlier in the sales process so that you get a faster, smoother handover as well. Like it's all, I think there's quite a lot of things to get from coming out of scope a little bit, but at the same time, I've been dealing with teams who are really reluctant to actually step into the new logo side because they are not incentivized to do that. It's time they take to essentially help someone else's metric, and it's time they come best.
He's lost connection. And I was lost.
Cool. Sorry for the slight bug here. So yeah, Mark, I was saying I see that the smarter CSS will understand the value of stepping essentially one step earlier in the process and almost a little bit out of scope based on what they're asked to actually deliver on their commission plan. And I've seen a lot of teams actually quite reluctant as well to do something they're not asked to, and they're not going to get straight benefit from it. How do you deal and how do you coach this behavior when this happens?
Yeah, that's a tricky one because I think everyone is consumed in their own day-to-day and they're wanting to look at that. We try and just build the culture. Really, it goes down to that of like everyone being a team player, helping out. I think the one big thing is everyone likes praise. So if a salesperson makes that sale, it really is putting them in and saying, thanks for coming to that. You really helped out. We can do kickbacks off the back of it, depending on how the sale works to get someone really involved. I know sort of on the CS side as well, if they go out and source their own business and sell it, that is a way for them to do it. But yeah, it really goes down to a cultural piece of we're all in it together. If we grow the company revenue, then there'll be something in it for you as well as an end result. But it goes back down to it actually makes their life easier. And I'm sure a lot of CS people would say, yes, if you are involved at some stage of the sale, actually, you already know what those expectations are versus starting again when it comes over. So yeah, it goes back to the cultural piece.
Yeah. All right. Awesome. I see the value completely, by the way. I think it's required just not to build credibility during the sales process, but to accelerate the handover, to make sure that there's skin in the game everywhere and throughout the life cycle.
Yeah, well, not just that. So just to add, what you also get from working in this way is the client often realizes return on investment much quicker as well, purely because that transition and onboarding piece is more efficient.
And we're not subtly pitching joint flows here at all. Like,
Yeah, we have clients who use joint flows for onboarding, but we're not here to pitch joint flows.
Mark, you're in one of the hottest market at the moment, influencer marketing, and it's probably as hot as is unknown in terms of what to expect, how to build it, how to scale it. Can you talk us through it and give us a little bit of maybe a few anecdotes that you've come across?
It's a really interesting market, actually, or part of marketing to be in. I think it's very amateur for where we are. You've got PPC, it's been around for years, everyone knows what they're doing. There's a pure ROI. I'm sort of going to claim this now, but before COVID and when COVID was happening, I actually said I think influencer marketing is the new billboard marketing. People go in on a train, there's less of that now. You stick a billboard up, they're not seeing it. Influencer marketing works in the same way, really. It's you follow someone, they're sticking up an ad and you're seeing it. So it's there's a hell of a lot changing. I don't think you can put a price on someone's post at the moment. It changes every week. The biggest challenge I think we face is the pure ROI off the back of it. And that's, when we were working together in different companies, you've got someone coming to site, you track them and you can get the conversion at the end of it. But because influencer marketing is so much at the front end of marketing, like billboard, it's how do you track that through? And the example that I always give is, if you're purchasing something relatively big, you're not going to be like, okay, cool, I'm going to buy it now. It's going to take time, 7 impressions of seeing a brand before you convert. And therefore, it's hard to get that pure ROI, but we know it works from the stats and the research that we've done. So it's interesting. I think where we are, we try and not to pitch it, but do it in a different approach where it's driving authenticity. So people come to you versus sourcing and influence saying, here, pay me 10 grand and I'll do it for you. They do it, they post and they move on. We're trying to build that ambassadorship sort of around what you guys do as well within that. So very interesting, a lot to come within it, early days. Let's see where it gets. There's a lot of scrutiny in influencer marketing as well with ASA and all of that, and making sure posts are genuine. So quite an interesting space.
Yeah, absolutely. I fully agree. It's where the attention is, right? Consumers' attention is already influencers are. It's all through social media and things like this. So it makes sense. As a brand, you need to be prominent there as well. But it goes back to I have this conversation all the time with people about return on investment. And, for me, if I'm acquiring a tool, I want to know what my ROI is going to be. But then there's some tools where the impact's more anecdotal. So it's very difficult to put a metric on it. From an influencer marketing perspective, because it is so early in the experience, usually for the consumer, how do you go about putting any element of an ROI on it?
Thanks, Hitesh. You brought me in here. So I always say I'm a bit of a data freak. I love it. I think you guys have seen that. I love looking at the data and where it goes and what it's telling us. We try and look at it in different ways. So you can absolutely track, you can do a UTM parameter on a post and you can track that through. But again, as I was saying earlier on, you can't necessarily track, someone's not going to convert in that moment. So it's going to take time. So that is one way to do it. I think on the paid element, that's what a lot of brands do. If you're going big, Cristiano Ronaldo, cool, you track it. They're only going to do the one and it probably will have an impact. The way that we tend to do it, you're talking about you want to see some return, is that, and again, I don't want to go into too much of it, but one of our mechanics of what we do is we save a lot of time. So the influencers will come to you versus you finding the influencers, like from our competitors. So we'll have a platform, we'll put an opportunity live, the influencer will say, yep, I want to take part in that campaign and come directly to you. And what we've built is a calculator that actually shows your ROI as time saving or as a cost. So you don't have to employ, well, you do, but you're saving that social media manager's time. If you look at their salary, you've saved X amount. You would have had to pay for that content, and we work on an exchange basis. So you're not paying for that. So we build it up as a saving. And then we'll also look at tracking their ROI in terms of pure, this is the post, this is what someone's bought, if we can through UTM parameters, but it gets a bit fiddly. So we'll try and add everything up to get a result.
Yeah.
How,
that makes sense.
how do you make these two worlds essentially collide? Because you're selling to marketers, very data driven, very process oriented, like there's a structure around it, and then they're used to being in full control of the message as well. So you speak about PPC campaign, you speak about billboards, like, you know, it's very easy for them to create exactly what they want, to actually hiring someone who's really popular on LinkedIn, a little bit bling bling, you know, a little bit of fame, a little bit of glitters, and they've got completely. How does that work?
It's one of the biggest challenges. So, and especially if you get to the bigger companies, FTSE 100 companies, they absolutely want to control the message that goes out. There are a few things. One, I think transparency. People, the end-to-end consumer, like they seeing through that now. So they know it is being controlled in a way, and they want to see the full picture. So I think brands being open to actually someone giving their review or their opinion is becoming more and more important. We're seeing a massive spike and a massive growth in what we call UGC, so user generated content. And across Facebook, that is people giving their opinion. And I know that's probably controlled to an element, but there is more of that is working to come out. So it's trying to get that message across. We do have data and stats behind it. So we've run thousands of campaigns. And actually there isn't influencers, they obviously want to work with the brands, so they won't directly go out of their way to say anything negative about a brand because they want to continue that relationship. But it is their review, and they will try and talk about it as honestly as they can. So it's a tough one, but it's up and coming. It is a challenge, is trying to match the two together.
Yeah, I bet. I just want to go back a little bit into the CS space as well. So obviously you're very experienced within the space. You know, you've come all the way through the ranks to now being a VP of CS over here as well. How are you seeing, what's it like today in the CS world compared to 2 years ago or even 18 months ago? What does that change in landscape look like for you?
So for me, I think previously it kind of goes into that, maybe even a bit further back, that support side. So it's like we were seen as the support, answer the ticket, get it over the line. Where we are now on CS is basically moving from reactive to proactive and take more of a consultancy approach. And that's one of my biggest things. I think in CS, if you're to be successful with your clients and get them to renew, yeah, cool, you're SaaS and it will do it. Do what it says on the tin, and that's fine. But actually, you also need to deliver that strategic view. And that's where CS will come in. What are we doing in 6 months' time, in 12 months' time? How can we be more successful and not just do that baseline, but make sure we're growing, make sure if this is your ROI, it's slightly higher, and that value is constantly growing. So it's really looking at the strategic consultant approach as to the main focus, I think, of CS now versus a few years ago.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that makes sense as well. But what do you do in this scenario where, you know, you've signed this client, and yes, you know, we're all the will in the world, you want to prove that added value, as you said, take that consultancy approach. But you have a client who, you know, there's a lot of space to grow the account, but your champion just isn't interested in anything outside of the basics. I've seen that happen before. It's like, hey, did you speak to him about this? I don't know. He just turns up to our monthly calls and that's it. And we barely speak and they just get on with it. And ultimately what happens is you get to the end of the year and they may or may not renew. So how do you go about engaging the right kind of behavior from your client and engaging those additional stakeholders as well?
It's almost going back to your roles from a sales perspective. So it's taking the sales approach and saying, okay, I think there's misalignment here. What are your challenges? And you're almost rediscovering what it is. Something in the business might have changed. So what are your challenges? And making sure we're focusing on that to then hopefully hit what we can then improve on. So I think there's that one element and realigning. I think the other thing is constant communication. So trying to do stuff, you know, we had this before. where you're running a campaign, someone's not really bothered. I think you've got to try and take as much of that away from them, get those results and drive it and say, look, just let us give this a go to begin with, and we'll show you the results. And then afterwards, hopefully it works. We have had the situation, and sort of being totally honest, if you are not going to make everyone happy, and that's just in life in general. And I think you have to reflect on those moments, and you've got to say, it's not working between both of us. Let's walk away from this. And we've had to do that. And it's very difficult. And sort of me even openly saying that in this conversation, you don't want to say it as a CS leader, but we aren't going to match to everyone. So if you've tried everything and you have, and you picked up the phone and you're calling someone and you've sent them results and it's just not happening, I think you've got to have that conversation where you say, cool, let's walk away and mutually agree it isn't working, versus causing tension between the two relationships.
Yeah, not just that, but you probably want to be working on accounts where there's opportunity to add value, right? So if they're not engaged in the first place, it's probably time you could spend better elsewhere.
Exactly.
Revenue quantity is good, but revenue quality is better.
Oh, look at that. Write that
I'm in with it.
I've learned that a few months ago. Mark, last question, and then we can wrap up. It's been really good. So we're early stage at Jointflows, and we are trying to understand where and when we should start thinking about bringing in a customer success team. What's your recommendation on this?
Mick, here he is throwing it in. I think it's when it starts impacting on the sales side, and you're getting so big that you can't manage both. I think if you're finding you can't spend enough time on those that have come on board, and there's still too much focus on the new business, that's where you need to look at someone to come in and look after it solely. I think I would say, and I sound a bit biased talking from a CS point, but it goes back to our conversation right at the beginning. CS, I now believe, should really be that glue, and it's making sure you can keep that relationship going. So as soon as you've also got to look at the business operations, right? Can you bring in that cost of someone and maintaining that relationship? And as soon as you can, I would look at that being one of your first hires. And if they can maintain the renewal and the baseline, then that will be covered and allow you to concentrate on the new business to excel sort of in both areas and really take the business off.
So in about 6 months' time, we should have you on board, basically.
That's it.
Wait for the phone call. Awesome. So look, Mark, we've got a closing tradition here. So the question of choice, if you've heard any of the episodes, I want to know what's coming. What is your favorite memory throughout your whole career?
I think this one's particularly dangerous here. With the background.
I can only say working with both of you. It's got to be up there. I joke, but as I said earlier, I quite clearly remember our little trip down to Wales, and that was good from a working side. So I can only, seen as I'm on this podcast with the two of you, say that is my favorite memory. No other way could I leave it.
All right, great. That's probably the best answer we've had so far. Awesome. Well, look, Mark, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for joining us. This has been a Revenue Revolution podcast sponsored by Jointflows. Until next time, thank you, Mark.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.